Let's get something straight. If you've ever felt like the world doesn't get you, maybe it's not you that's the problem. Maybe you're just tuned into something deeper. Carl Jung wasn't afraid to say it. Some minds are wired to see the invisible, to sense what others miss, to live from a place most people never even visit. If you're one of those people, an intuitive, a thinker, someone who processes life in metaphors and internal storms, then you've probably spent years hiding your deepest insights just to avoid being labeled strange. But what if your symbolic dreams, your inner nudges, your quiet sense of knowing were actually your greatest strength? What if society has it backwards, praising surface-level hustle while ignoring the silent genius growing underground? Jung saw this. He studied it, and he left us a trail of gold, wisdom that speaks directly to the intuitive-introvert, the intuitive-extrovert, and every soul walking between dimensions. This isn't another self-help fluff piece. This is for the ones who live in the shadows of their own brilliance, waiting for a map, a signal, or maybe just someone to say, "You're not crazy, you're just deep." And the deeper you go, the more power you hold. Most people miss the beauty of an intuitive introvert's mind because they're too focused on what's visible. But let me tell you something. The real action happens behind the scenes, in that quiet inner world where thoughts bloom like wildflowers no one else notices. Jungian psychology gets it right. These folks aren't antisocial. They're tuned into something deeper. They see meaning in moments others rush past. That kind of subjective perception isn't just rare, it's gold. It's the difference between watching the surface of the ocean and knowing what moves in the deep. Now picture this. An intuitive introvert might look calm at dinner, sipping tea, but inside, they're charting the emotional climate of everyone at the table. They feel shifts, they notice silences, and they sense motives like a sixth sense, long before words are even spoken. And when they speak up, it's often a lightning bolt of truth no one saw coming. It's no surprise their therapeutic insight can feel almost eerie. Think of it like a mental sonar. They're pinging the depths, not just skimming the surface. That's not just awareness, it's their nature. But here's the twist. Intuitive extroverts ride a different wave. They chase symbols out in the world, not in solitude, sensing potential where others see chaos. They might walk into a startup office and feel whether it'll fly or flop within minutes. Both types live in the realm of possibility, but while introverts internalize it, extroverts externalize it. It's not one being better than the other. It's like comparing thunder and lightning, different energies, same storm. And speaking of storms, wait until you see how those symbolic experiences stir up the next layer. Topic 2, symbolic inner experiences. Let me paint you a picture. Jung once spoke of a young woman who saw a snake rising from her abdomen. Sounds strange? Maybe, but in Jungian psychology, that wasn't madness, it was transformation. For the intuitive type, the snake metaphor wasn't just a creepy image. It was a vivid, symbolic experience of change erupting from deep within. This wasn't something she read in a book or heard in therapy. It was her psyche's way of saying, "Wake up, something powerful is shifting." That's the kind of thing people don't get unless they've felt it. For intuitive introverts especially, emotions don't just surface. They manifest in symbols, dreams, and images that hit like a punch to the soul. You ever dream of fire, falling, or flying? That's your inner world speaking in code. The problem is, most folks ignore it or brush it off as nonsense. But intuitive types listen closely. They don't just process change, they experience it in bold, living color, like watching a movie projected from the heart. And that's where the magic lies. These symbols aren't decorations, they're messages. You don't need a PhD to catch them. Just a little self-trust and space to reflect. Start journaling your dreams, pay attention to recurring imagery, or meditate and observe what surfaces without judgment. It's not always a snake, sure, but the language of the soul is never random. And when someone lives in that language daily, they begin to move through the world with a different kind of awareness that can sometimes make them seem, well, out of touch with reality. especially when everyone else is busy just keeping up appearances. Topic 3. Disconnected from reality. Now here's the kicker. Remember that same young woman with the snake vision? She didn't even know she was living in a brothel. She thought it was a friendly boarding house filled with cheerful girls. That right there is the double-edged sword of the intuitive introvert. So deep in their subjective perception, they sometimes lose grip on external facts. It's not denial. It's just that their focus is locked on what's happening inside. The outer world becomes a blur when the inner one is in high definition. It's like trying to drive with your eyes closed because you're listening to the music in your soul. Beautiful, yes. Risky, also yes. These individuals might miss social cues, overlook obvious signs, or misunderstand settings entirely. They're not clueless, they're just dialed into a different frequency. If you've ever walked into a room and missed that someone was flirting with you because you were too busy thinking about the meaning of life, you get it. That's the inner world taking the wheel while the world outside honks in frustration. And this detachment, it can be confusing for others. Roommates, co-workers, even friends may think they're distant or lost. But here's the truth. Their head isn't in the clouds. It's deep in the soil of meaning, of unconscious material bubbling to the surface. The intuitive extrovert might catch these insights in public life, but the introvert, they live there. Still, this internal richness often comes with a price, being misunderstood, misread, or judged. And that's where we go next, into the sometimes lonely world of social misunderstanding. Topic 4. Misunderstood by society. Let's be real, when someone says they had a vision of a snake transforming them from the inside out, most people raise an eyebrow. Intuitive introverts often keep their insights under lock and key, not because they're shy, but because they've learned the hard way that the world isn't always kind to the deeply symbolic. Society tends to trust what it can measure and label, and if something doesn't fit into a neat little box, it gets tossed into the weird pile. These rich, symbolic experiences aren't just misunderstood, they're dismissed. Imagine sharing a profound inner realization, only to be met with awkward silence or, worse, a polite referral to therapy. That's the kind of reaction many face when they dare to speak their inner truth. But here's the thing, they aren't delusional, they're attuned. This is the price of accessing deep therapeutic insight. The symbolic inner world doesn't come with subtitles for the crowd, and when someone reads between the lines of life, society often hands them the wrong book entirely. It's not about being antisocial or out of touch. It's about expressing a different layer of reality that isn't obvious to the average eye. Intuitive extroverts may find it easier to disguise their insights in action or art, but introverts, they wrestle with whether to speak at all. Still, behind their quiet hesitation is a fire of perception most people only dream of accessing. And while many turn away, those who stay begin to notice something almost uncanny in these individuals, their extraordinary perceptiveness. Topic 5. Extraordinary perceptiveness. You ever met someone who just knows things about you without you saying a word? That's not a magic trick. It's the radar of an intuitive personality at full power. These folks can walk into a room and feel tension hanging in the air like fog. They notice what's not being said, sense emotional shifts, and connect dots most never even see. Jung called it a form of psychological intelligence. Far from guessing, it's a refined form of sensing through subjective perception, and when it shows up, it can feel downright supernatural. This isn't party trick energy, though. It's deep, personal, and often startling. An intuitive introvert might tell you something about your past that you never shared, or spot your insecurities and soothe them before you even speak. Some people are startled, others drawn in like moths to a quiet flame. That's the power of living close to the symbolic. When you listen to your inner world long enough, you start hearing the hidden language of others. And for the intuitive extrovert, this can show up in public settings, like suddenly reading a crowd or anticipating trends no one spotted. Still, it's not always easy to carry this kind of perception. It can be overwhelming to see behind people's masks while they still pretend everything's fine. And yet, this is the intuitive gift, seeing not just who someone is, but who they could be. That kind of insight isn't taught, it's felt. But even the most gifted intuitive needs balance. And as Jung points out, that's where psychological compensation comes in, shaping surprising behaviors that often defy logic but reveal deep inner harmony. Topic 6. Psychological compensations. Here's a quirky twist in Jungian psychology. When one side of your personality dominates, the other doesn't disappear. It shows up in unexpected, often humorous ways, like the introverted thinker who's all logic, philosophy, and silence, then suddenly falls head over heels for the most emotionally expressive person in the room. Jung joked about a philosopher marrying his cook, and it's not just a punchline, it's compensation in action. That neglected emotional side needs airtime, and it often finds expression in someone else's arms. It's not irrational, it's balance looking for a way out. Think about your own life. Ever found yourself oddly drawn to someone completely different from you? That's not random. If you're an intuitive introvert living in your mind, the universe has a funny way of nudging you into dance classes, loud social circles, or relationships that make you feel things instead of just analyzing them. It's not sabotage. It's psychological alignment. Even the snake metaphor from earlier could be seen as the body's way of balancing mental introspection with physical awareness. These random urges aren't mistakes, they're messages. The same goes for intuitive extroverts who suddenly crave solitude or dive deep into personal reflection after years of social buzz. That switch isn't a breakdown, it's the psyche calling home the parts that have been left out. Understanding this dynamic can bring major therapeutic insight. You stop fighting the parts of you that seem odd and start seeing them as invitations. And that opens a whole new doorway to self-awareness, especially for those ready to follow Jung's map into the deeper layers of personality typology. So, here's the question. Are you going to keep hiding your depth, or are you finally ready to use it? The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more truth. And if you've got that inner fire, that quiet radar, that symbolic lens on life, you owe it to yourself to lean in. Jung's wisdom wasn't meant to sit on a dusty shelf. It was meant to wake you up, to remind you that being different might actually mean being designed for something greater. Are you noticing patterns in your dreams? Do you feel things before they happen? Have you ever kept quiet because you knew they wouldn't understand? That's not weird, that's powerful. But power without awareness can turn into isolation. So don't just nod and move on. Reflect, write, speak up. Use what you've learned today to reframe how you see yourself and others. You're not too much, you're not broken, you're tuned in. And if this resonated with you, don't disappear. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, stay with us, because there's more to uncover, more to activate, and more depth to explore. Your inner world deserves a spotlight, and we're just getting started.